As I stepped off the plane into the cool, crisp air of Portland, I knew my life was about to change. But little did I know, the journey ahead would lead me deep into a haunting mystery. What secrets lie within the walls of my new home, the old Whitmore house? In the next few minutes, you'll join me as I unravel the chilling story of Emily Hart, a young woman whose tragic past still whispers through the shadows. Have you ever felt an unexplainable connection to someone you've never met? What if that connection pulled you into a web of danger and deceit? Stick around as I dig deeper into a mystery that intertwines our lives, revealing not just Emily's fate, but also the chilling truths hidden in plain sight. This isn't just about a house. It's about discovering what really happened and seeking justice for a voice that still cries out for help. Will you dare to explore this dark chapter with me? Let's uncover the truth together. As I stepped off the plane and into the crisp, cool air of Portland, Oregon, a mix of excitement and anxiety bubbled within me. This was it, the fresh start I had been yearning for. The city sprawled before me, a blend of vibrant culture and natural beauty, beckoning me to explore. I clutched the handle of my suitcase tightly, taking a deep breath as I prepared to leave the chaos of my past behind. The drive to my new home was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. As we navigated through the winding streets, I couldn't help but admire the historic homes that lined the sidewalks. Each one seemed to tell a story of its own, and I felt a strange connection to the architecture that surrounded me. When my eyes finally landed on my new abode, I was struck by its charm. The house stood tall, with dark wood siding and a steep roof that seemed to scrape the sky. Its front porch, adorned with intricate carvings, invited me to step inside. But there was something else about it, a peculiar aura that sent a chill down my spine. "Here we are," the driver announced, pulling to a stop. I fumbled for my wallet, my nerves tingling as I stepped out of the car. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the dry heat I was used to. As I unloaded my suitcase and crossed the threshold, a wave of anticipation washed over me. The interior was just as enchanting as the exterior, with high ceilings and hardwood floors that creaked underfoot. I wandered from room to room, my heart dancing with the possibilities that lay ahead. The empty spaces felt alive, whispering secrets to me. However, when I stepped into the bedroom, an inexplicable chill wrapped around me, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I shivered involuntarily, pushing the sensation aside as mere nerves. "It's just the old house," I muttered to myself, forcing a smile. I took a moment to appreciate the tall windows that let in soft, diffused light, and I envisioned how I would arrange my furniture to make it feel like home. Later that afternoon, I decided to explore the neighborhood. I strolled down tree-lined streets, admiring the quaint shops and cafes that dotted the landscape. It was in this exploration that I encountered Mr. Thompson, my reclusive neighbor, who was tending to his garden. He looked up as I approached, his weathered face breaking into a cautious smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he called, wiping dirt from his hands. "Thank you. I'm Clara," I replied, extending my hand. He took it, his grip firm yet gentle. "Pleasure to meet you, Clara. You've moved into the old Whitmore house, haven't you?" I nodded, a hint of pride swelling in my chest. "Yes, it's beautiful." Mr. Thompson's smile faltered, and a shadow passed over his features. "Beautiful, yes, but it has a dark past, you should know." He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "There was a tragedy there in your bedroom, to be precise." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "What kind of tragedy?" He glanced around, lowering his voice. "Years ago, a young woman named Emily was murdered in that room. It was brutal." "Really?" I chuckled nervously, brushing off his words. "I'm sure it's just a story people tell." Mr. Thompson's gaze was intense, almost pleading. "Clara, I wouldn't joke about something like that. Just be careful and don't let curiosity lead you into trouble." I waved goodbye and continued my stroll, dismissing his ominous warning as superstition. Yet, as I returned to my new home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. That night, I was jolted awake by strange noises echoing through the house. Shadows danced along the walls, and I could have sworn I heard whispers calling my name. Heart pounding, I got out of bed and tiptoed toward the sound. My fingers brushed against the cool wood of the bedside drawer, and with a trembling hand, I opened it. There, nestled among the clutter, was an old photograph of a woman with hauntingly beautiful features. Her name, Emily, was scribbled on the back. A chill ran down my spine as I felt an inexplicable connection to her. It was as if she was reaching out to me, desperate to share her story. "Emily," I whispered, my heart racing. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. A thread that would pull me deeper into a mystery I never expected to unravel. The day after my unsettling discovery of the photograph, I felt an inexplicable urgency to learn more about Emily's past. After a quick breakfast, I grabbed my laptop, a notepad, and a steaming cup of coffee, settling into the cozy yet eerie living room. The air felt thick with anticipation, almost as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to uncover its secrets. I began my search, typing "Emily Murder Portland" into the search bar. The screen flickered with results, and I clicked on the first link that promised details about the history of my house. The article described a young woman named Emily Hart, who had been found dead in her bedroom decades ago. My heart raced as I read about the gruesome details of her murder. A broken heart slashed through the pages, each word echoing in the silence of the room. It felt as if I was being drawn closer to her, the connection between us growing stronger. "Clara?" My friend Lisa's voice interrupted my thoughts as she called me over the phone. "Have you settled in yet?" "Kind of," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "You won't believe what I found out about this place. Isn't it just charming? Historic homes have such character," she chirped, oblivious to the darkness that lingered just beneath the surface. "Charming, yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But Emily was murdered in my bedroom, Lisa. It's all over the news archives. The case is still unsolved." There was a pause on the line. "Oh my God, Clara. Are you serious? That's creepy." "I know," I exclaimed, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the articles. "I feel like I need to know more about her. There's something compelling about her story." "Be careful. You're not going to start talking to ghosts, are you?" she joked, but her laughter felt strained. After hanging up, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, but I brushed it aside. Instead, I dove deeper into the archives. The more I read, the more I felt Emily's presence surrounding me. Each sentence painted a picture of her life, her dreams, her love, and ultimately, her tragic end. Was there something she wanted me to uncover? The thought sent chills through me, but I felt an unyielding determination to find out the truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I drifted into a restless sleep. In my dreams, I found myself in a dimly lit room filled with shadows and whispers. Suddenly, there she was, Emily, her ethereal form glowing softly. "Help me," she pleaded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You must know my story." I sat up abruptly, the dream fading, but leaving behind a lingering sense of urgency. I felt a compelling need to understand what happened to her, and in that moment, I resolved to visit the local library the next day. The next morning, I arrived at the Portland Public Library, the grand building standing proud against the cloudy sky. The musty smell of old books greeted me, and I felt a sense of comfort wash over me. I approached the information desk, where a kind librarian with silver hair awaited my request. "Hi, I'm looking for old newspaper articles, specifically about a woman named Emily Hart. She was murdered in the 1970s, I believe." The librarian raised an eyebrow, her expression turning serious. "Ah, yes. That case was quite infamous. Follow me, I'll show you where to find the archives." As we walked through the rows of bookshelves, my heart raced with anticipation. I could almost feel Emily's spirit guiding me. When we reached the designated section, I sifted through the faded newspapers, my fingers trembling with excitement and fear. Finally, I found an article that caught my eye. "Local girl found dead. Boyfriend a prime suspect." I scanned the text, my heart pounding as I read about Jake, Emily's boyfriend, who had been the last person seen with her. The article mentioned that he had been questioned but never charged, leaving the community in shock and confusion. I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. Could he still be out there, living a life untouched by the horrors of that night? "Is everything all right?" the librarian asked, breaking my concentration. "Just trying to piece things together," I replied, my mind racing. "Thank you for your help." As I left the library, the weight of the information pressed down on me. I had to find Jake. I needed to hear his side of the story. The more I learned, the more I felt compelled to uncover the truth that had been buried for so long. Emily was reaching out to me, and I couldn't turn my back on her. The air was thick with tension when I finally tracked down Jake. The once vibrant man had succumbed to the weight of the years, his face lined with regret and shadows of the past. I found him in a modest, weather-beaten cottage on the outskirts of Portland, surrounded by overgrown weeds and peeling paint that mirrored his own faded spirit. As I knocked on the door, my heart raced. What would I say? Would he even remember Emily? I could hear shuffling inside before the door creaked open. Jake stood there, a specter of the man he once was. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff, eyes narrowing as he took in my presence. "Jake, I'm Clara. I'm looking for information about Emily," I stammered, unsure of how to approach the topic of his deceased girlfriend. I felt a shiver run down my spine, as if Emily herself was urging me on. His expression hardened, and for a moment, I thought he might slam the door in my face. "I don't want to talk about her," he replied, his tone icy. But I pressed on, the stories I'd heard about him swirling in my mind, each fragment a piece of the puzzle I was desperate to complete. "Please, I need to understand what happened. She's been reaching out to me," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. The mention of Emily seemed to crack something within him, and he stepped back, allowing me to enter. The interior of his home was dimly lit, cluttered with old furniture and memories that had long since faded. I could sense the weight of his sorrow in the air, heavy and palpable. "You think you can fix this? You think you can uncover the truth?" he asked bitterly. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I have to try. I feel like I'm connected to her. There are things she wants me to know." His eyes softened for just a moment, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. It was a glimpse of the man who must have loved Emily fiercely. "She was beautiful, full of life," he murmured, almost to himself. "But I wasn't good enough for her. I was just a stupid kid who didn't know how to keep her safe." There was a tremor in his voice as he spoke, and I sensed the guilt that had haunted him all these years. "Jake, did you see anything? Hear anything the night she died?" I pressed, urgency bubbling within me. His gaze dropped to the floor, and I could see the conflict waging war within him. "I didn't kill her," he said suddenly, his voice rising defensively. "I loved her. I would never hurt her." The pain in his eyes was undeniable, but something told me he was hiding more than he was revealing. "Then help me find out who did," I urged, desperation creeping into my tone. "Emily deserves justice. I can feel her spirit here, and it's restless. She needs closure." He ran a hand through his thinning hair, frustration evident on his face. "You think I haven't tried? I've lived with this every day, Clara. I can't go back to that night. I can't." His voice trailed off, lost in memories that were perhaps better left undisturbed. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a notification, jolting me from the moment. It was a message from an unknown number, the screen eerily lit in the dim room. "Find the hidden object. It holds the truth." I felt a chill wash over me, the air growing colder as if Emily's presence was drawing nearer. "Who is that?" Jake asked, his eyes darting to my phone, suspicion creeping back into his voice. "You shouldn't be messing with things you don't understand." "It's Emily," I replied, my heart racing. "She's telling me to look for something in the house, something that could reveal what happened to her." The urgency pulsed through me, and I knew I had to act quickly. As I stood there, torn between Jake's haunted gaze and the pull of the spirit that beckoned me, I made a decision. I'm going back home. I need to search the house. If there's something hidden, I'll find it. He shook his head, a mix of fear and concern etched on his face. "You don't know what you're getting into. That house, it's not just old wood and bricks. It's a tomb for secrets." "I can't turn back now," I insisted, determination flooding my veins. "Emily deserves to be heard. I won't let her down." With that, I left Jake's cottage, the weight of our conversation hanging in the air like a storm cloud. As I drove back to the historic house, the shadows lengthening around me, I felt a sense of purpose ignite within me. Emily was counting on me, and I would not fail her. The truth awaited, hidden within the very walls that had once confined her spirit in a tragic silence. I would find it, whatever it took. The loud crash echoed through the hallways, sending a shiver down my spine. My heart raced as I cautiously approached the source of the noise. The dim light from the hallway illuminated the edges of the living room. casting long shadows that danced eerily on the walls. I could feel the weight of something sinister in the air, a heaviness that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of my quickening breath. As I stepped into the room, I saw a figure hunched over near the shattered remains of a flower pot. "Mr. Thompson?" I exclaimed, recognizing the elderly neighbor. His frail frame tensed at the sound of my voice, and he turned to face me, his expression a mix of embarrassment and urgency. I'm sorry, Clara," he stammered, brushing dirt from his hands. "I didn't mean to startle you. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I echoed, trying to comprehend the situation. "From what? You broke into my house." He straightened, his eyes glistening with a mixture of fear and resolve. "From Emily's spirit. She's restless, and her energy is stronger than ever. You shouldn't be here alone." I crossed my arms, skepticism creeping in. "You think I should just leave because of a ghost? If Emily is here, I need to help her. I can't just abandon her like that." Mr. Thompson sighed, shaking his head slowly. "You don't understand. The spirit is disturbed because her murderer is still at large. You're playing with forces you cannot comprehend, Clara. It's dangerous." "How do you know so much about this?" I demanded, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "What aren't you telling me?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I knew Emily. I was close to her. The night she died, I saw things I've kept to myself for too long." "Then tell me," I urged, stepping closer. "You can't just leave me hanging like this. I need to know what happened." A deep breath escaped his lips, and he looked back at me, his expression grave. "Emily was terrified. She confided in me about someone who was threatening her. I warned her to be careful, but I was too late. The last thing she said to me was that she had to confront him. She thought she could handle it, but it cost her everything." "Who was it, Mr. Thompson?" I pressed, urgency lacing my tone. "You have to tell me who she was afraid of." He shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid it's someone you know, someone who was supposed to care for her." "Jake?" The name slipped from my lips, a cold realization dawning. "You think he—" "I don't know," Mr. Thompson interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "But I do know that if you continue to dig into this, you might become a target yourself. I can't lose another person I care about." His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. "I can't just walk away," I insisted, my determination hardening. "Emily deserves justice. If there's even a chance that Jake is involved, I have to find out the truth." "Clara, please," Mr. Thompson pleaded, desperation etched on his face. "You don't know what you're dealing with. The past has a way of reaching out, and it's not always forgiving." I took a step back, weighing his words. My mind raced back to the dreams, the whispers, the visions of Emily reaching out to me. The connection I felt with her was undeniable. "I have to help her," I said finally, the resolve firm in my voice. Mr. Thompson nodded, but his expression was grim. "Then be careful. I'll be nearby if you need me, but you must tread lightly." After he left, I stood in the living room, the shadows closing in around me like a shroud. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the house itself was alive with secrets. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the precipice of something far greater than myself. Emily's spirit was reaching out, and I was the only one who could answer her call. As night fell, I decided to take a bold step. I would seek out a medium, someone who could help me connect with Emily directly. I needed to hear her voice, to understand the truth behind the tragedy that had unfolded in my bedroom. It was time to confront the darkness that lingered within these walls, once and for all. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. I was ready to dive deeper into this mystery, even if it meant facing the shadows that threatened to consume me. The aftermath of the séance left me shaken to my core. As I sat on the edge of my bed, the candlelight flickering ominously around the room, I replayed the medium's words in my mind. Someone Emily trusted is her murderer. A shudder ran down my spine as I thought of Jake and Mr. Thompson. Both had played significant roles in my unraveling of this tragedy, but could either of them be capable of such darkness? I paced the room, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. My heart raced as I considered my options. I needed answers, and I needed them now. With a deep breath, I grabbed my jacket and headed out, determined to confront Jake again. The night was heavy, cloaked in a blanket of fog that muffled my footsteps. as I made my way to his home. The air felt charged, as if it were holding its breath in anticipation. When I arrived at Jake's doorstep, I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering mid-air before I knocked. The sound echoed in the stillness, making my heart thump louder in response. After a minute that felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing Jake with his weary eyes and unkempt hair. "Clara," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and caution. "What are you doing here? I need to talk to you," I replied firmly. "About Emily." Jake's expression shifted, a flicker of something unrecognizable crossing his face. "I told you before, I don't want to discuss it." I stepped inside, ignoring his protests. "I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. I learned something tonight, something that implicates you." He flinched, the door nearly closing before I wedged my foot in to stop it. "You don't know what you're getting into, Clara. Some truths are better left buried." "Why are you so afraid?" I pressed, my voice growing more intense. "Did you kill her?" I could feel the weight of something sinister in the air, a heaviness that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of my quickening breath. As I stepped into the room, I saw a figure hunched over near the shattered remains of a flower pot. "Mr. Thompson?" I exclaimed, recognizing the elderly neighbor. His frail frame tensed at the sound of my voice, and he turned to face me, his expression a mix of embarrassment and urgency. I'm sorry, Clara," he stammered, brushing dirt from his hands. "I didn't mean to startle you. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I echoed, trying to comprehend the situation. "From what? You broke into my house." He straightened, his eyes glistening with a mixture of fear and resolve. "From Emily's spirit. She's restless, and her energy is stronger than ever. You shouldn't be here alone." I crossed my arms, skepticism creeping in. "You think I should just leave because of a ghost? If Emily is here, I need to help her. I can't just abandon her like that." Mr. Thompson sighed, shaking his head slowly. "You don't understand. The spirit is disturbed because her murderer is still at large. You're playing with forces you cannot comprehend, Clara. It's dangerous." "How do you know so much about this?" I demanded, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "What aren't you telling me?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I knew Emily. I was close to her. The night she died, I saw things I've kept to myself for too long." "Then tell me," I urged, stepping closer. "You can't just leave me hanging like this. I need to know what happened." A deep breath escaped his lips, and he looked back at me, his expression grave. "Emily was terrified. She confided in me about someone who was threatening her. I warned her to be careful, but I was too late. The last thing she said to me was that she had to confront him. She thought she could handle it, but it cost her everything." "Who was it, Mr. Thompson?" I pressed, urgency lacing my tone. "You have to tell me who she was afraid of." He shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid it's someone you know, someone who was supposed to care for her." "Jake?" The name slipped from my lips, a cold realization dawning. "You think he—" "I don't know," Mr. Thompson interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "But I do know that if you continue to dig into this, you might become a target yourself. I can't lose another person I care about." His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. "I can't just walk away," I insisted, my determination hardening. "Emily deserves justice. If there's even a chance that Jake is involved, I have to find out the truth." "Clara, please," Mr. Thompson pleaded, desperation etched on his face. "You don't know what you're dealing with. The past has a way of reaching out, and it's not always forgiving." I took a step back, weighing his words. The weight of Emily's unresolved fate pressed heavily on my shoulders, a constant reminder of why I was here. Clenching the crowbar in my hands, I took a deep breath and swung it against the drywall. The sound echoed in the silence, a cry for justice reverberating through the house. With each hit, the dust swirled around me, a ghostly fog that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. "Come on, Clara, just a little more," I muttered to myself, feeling the adrenaline pumping through my veins. The wall cracked, and I felt a surge of hope. I swung again, and finally a large piece gave way, revealing a dark space beyond. Peering inside, I could barely believe my eyes. The small chamber was filled with boxes and old furniture draped in white sheets, as if they were sleeping beneath a veil of dust. My heart raced as I stepped closer, the dim light from my bedroom illuminating the edges of what lay hidden. I brushed aside a sheet and gasped when I saw a leather-bound diary resting on a makeshift shelf. "Emily's diary," I whispered, my fingers trembling as I reached for it. The moment I touched it, a chill ran through me. I could almost feel Emily's presence, urging me to uncover her story. I carefully opened the diary, and the musty scent of aged paper filled the air. The first page was filled with Emily's delicate handwriting, and as I read, the lines blurred with tears. August 12th, 1947. I met him today. He is everything I dreamed of, charming, mysterious, but there's something darker lurking beneath the surface. My breath caught in my throat. Emily had been entangled with someone dangerous, and I could only assume she was referring to Mr. Thompson. As I turned the pages, the depth of Emily's emotions unfolded before me. There were entries filled with joy, love, and excitement, but they quickly turned to fear and despair. September 20th, 1947, I discovered the truth about him. He's not who he claims to be. I need to get away, but I fear he won't let me. My heart pounded as I read her words. Emily had been trapped, much like I felt now. The final entry shook me to my core. October 15th, 1947. I can't live with this secret anymore. He has done terrible things, and I know I'm not safe. If anything happens to me, it was him. I loved him once, but love can turn dark. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Mr. Thompson wasn't just a neighbor. He was a part of Emily's tragic story, a story that ended in murder. I felt bile rise in my throat as I closed the diary, my mind racing with the implications. I had to confront him. I rushed downstairs, the diary clutched tightly in my hands, my heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. I found Mr. Thompson in his yard, tending to his garden, a facade of normalcy that felt grotesque now. "Mr. Thompson," I shouted, my voice trembling. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face. "We need to talk, now." He wiped the dirt from his hands, a wary expression settling on his features. "Clara, is everything all right? You look pale." "Don't play games with me," I snapped, stepping closer. "I know about Emily. I found her diary." His expression shifted, shadows creeping into his eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," he warned, his voice low and menacing. "Why did you kill her?" The words escaped my lips before I could stop myself. "You silenced her to protect your secrets." For a moment, he seemed to waver, his facade cracking. "You don't understand. She was going to ruin everything. I couldn't let that happen." "You murdered her," I screamed, feeling the weight of Emily's spirit behind me, urging me to stand my ground. In an instant, the atmosphere shifted. Mr. Thompson lunged toward me, but just as he did, a powerful gust of wind tore through the yard, rattling branches and lifting the papers from his gardening table. I stumbled back, feeling a protective force envelop me. "Stop!" I shouted, and in that moment, the air crackled with energy. Emily's spirit materialized beside me, radiant and fierce. "You will not harm her." The look on Mr. Thompson's face morphed from anger to sheer terror as he realized he was not alone in this confrontation. The police sirens echoed in the distance, drawing closer, and I felt a rush of relief. "Your time is up," I said, standing tall beside Emily's spirit. "You will answer for your crimes." Just as the police arrived, Mr. Thompson's face twisted in defeat. He turned to flee, but the officers intercepted him, grabbing his arms and pinning him to the ground. As they took him away, I felt Emily's presence fade. But not before she whispered, "Thank you." The weight of the house lifted, and for the first time, I felt a sense of freedom. I had uncovered the truth, and in doing so, I had shaped my own future, one without fear.